The rain had just begun to fall when Leila stepped off the last bus home. It was nearly midnight, and the streets were empty except for the soft hiss of tires over wet pavement and the occasional flicker of streetlights. She lived on the edge of town, near the woods that most locals avoided after dark. Her path home was a narrow sidewalk that ran beside the tree line, and though she'd walked it many times, tonight felt different. Each step echoed, and the rain seemed to hush the world around her. As she passed an old gate that led into the woods, she heard something, a low shuffle, followed by a soft whistle, as if someone were mimicking the wind. She paused, glanced back, and saw nothing, yet the feeling that she was being watched crept in like the fog. She quickened her pace. The whistle came again, this time closer. Leila didn't turn around. She knew the stories about this part of the woods, about how those who looked back sometimes didn't make it home. Heart pounding, she reached her porch, slipped inside, and locked the door. As she peeled off her wet coat, a knock came at the window behind her. She lived alone. 3 years ago, Josh moved into an old farmhouse he'd inherited from an uncle he barely remembered. The house had stood empty for over a decade, but it was sturdy, and Josh liked the idea of fixing it up himself. On his third night there, a storm rolled in. Rain lashed against the windows, and the wind howled through the chimneys. While sitting in the living room reading, he heard footsteps upstairs. He froze. He hadn't yet explored the attic, and the house was supposed to be empty. He grabbed a flashlight and crept up the narrow staircase. Each step creaked beneath him, and the air grew colder as he approached the attic door. When he opened it, the beam of light caught something moving fast into the corner. But when he looked, there was only an old rocking chair. It began to move. Slowly, he stepped back and slammed the door shut. The next morning, he found small, muddy footprints leading from the attic to his bedroom door. He boarded the attic and never opened it again. But every stormy night, the chair starts rocking. Carmen used to work night shifts at a small town motel just off the highway. Most of the guests were truckers or travelers, and the place had seen better days. One rainy night, around 2 a.m., a man came in without an umbrella or coat. His clothes were dry, his eyes wide and staring. He didn't speak at first, just placed a $100 bill on the counter and asked for any room farthest from the lobby. Carmen gave him room 12. An hour later, the night phone rang from that same room, but when she answered, there was only static. She tried calling back and no answer. She checked the monitor, and the hallway outside room 12 was empty. Against protocol, she walked down the hallway, only to find the door wide open. The room was dark and cold, the sheets untouched. The man was gone, but the $100 bill was still on the nightstand. She checked the cameras again and realized something chilling. The man never showed up on any footage, not at the counter, not in the hallway, not even entering the building. Late one October night, a family in a small cabin deep in the woods was preparing for bed when the power suddenly went out. They lit candles, played board games, and tried to ignore the growing sound of the storm outside. Around 11 p.m., the youngest son pointed toward the window and asked, "Who's that man watching us?" The parents looked, but saw nothing. The boy insisted, "He's right there. He keeps smiling." The next day, they found small handprints on the outside glass, too small for an adult, too long for a child. They assumed it was a trick of the light, until it happened again and again, always during storms, always late at night. The boy kept describing them on long arms, wide grin, no eyes. After a few months, they moved away. Years later, a new family moved in, and on a rainy night, the new owner called police, reporting a man outside his window with a terrifying smile. But when police arrived, the woods were empty. Only one thing remained, a trail of barefoot prints in the mud, circling the cabin. Ellie worked in a nursing home where most of the residents were quiet, except for Mr. Granger. He was in his 90s and claimed to see things others couldn't. On stormy nights, he would get agitated and beg the nurses to close the blinds. "They come in with the rain," he'd whisper. Tall, wet things with no faces. Most dismissed it as dementia, but one night Ellie stayed late during a power outage. The backup generator kept only emergency lights on, casting the halls and dim orange. As she checked on Mr. Granger, she noticed wet footprints in the hallway, leading from the back exit toward his room. She checked the camera so there was no sign of anyone entering. Mr. Granger was trembling, hiding beneath his blankets. "They're already inside," he said. As she turned to leave, she saw a shadow, a tall, thin, dripping, standing motionless at the end of the hall. The moment she blinked, it vanished. Mr. Granger died in his sleep that night. The next morning, the night nurse found another set of wet footprints leading out of the building. A truck driver named Ron was making a late delivery through the mountains when heavy rain forced him to pull over. He parked near a rest stop known for being nearly abandoned after dark. As he settled into rest, he noticed someone standing in the fog near the edge of the parking lot. They didn't move. Thinking it was another stranded driver, he ignored it. Minutes passed, then an hour. The figure remained. Ron finally turned on his high beam sight and saw nothing. But moments later, he heard knocking on a passenger side window. He jumped. No one was there. Then the knocking came again, now on the driver's side. He sped away. At the next town, he checked the footage from his dash cam. What he saw made his skin crawl. For the last 30 minutes, a figure had been standing beside his truck, its head tilted, its hands on the glass, though no one was visible in person. He quit long-haul driving the next day and never drove that route again. A group of college friends rented a cabin in the woods for a weekend getaway. They laughed, drank, and shared stories as rain pattered on the tin roof. That night, someone suggested a game. Everyone had to share the scariest true story they knew. One girl, Lena, went last. She said she didn't want to play, but after some pushing, she told a story about a girl just like her, who went into a cabin just like theirs. She claimed the girl was never seen again, and the last thing she ever did was tell that story. Everyone laughed nervously, then went to bed. At 3 a.m., someone screamed. Lena was missing. Her bed was untouched, her shoes still by the door. They searched the woods, the cabin, the lake, and nothing. When the police arrived, the only thing they found was her phone, open to the audio app, still recording. The last 10 seconds of the file, her whispering, "It's behind me," then silence. Her body was never found. An elderly man named Thomas lived alone in a small cottage near the forest. He was known for being eccentric, always warning children not to whistle at night. "Whistling calls them," he'd say, "and once they hear you, they never stop listening." No one believed him until the night a group of teenagers passed his house and mocked him by whistling loudly. Rain began to pour minutes later. The group continued on, but by the next morning, one of them was missing. The others reported hearing strange footsteps behind them, soft whistles from the trees, and cold breath on their necks. They found the missing boy days later, deep in the woods, staring blankly, unable to speak. The only sound he made was a low, continuous whistle. Thomas never said, "I told you so," but for the rest of his life, every time it rained, he sat by his window with the blinds drawn and never made a sound.